Do you enjoy playing creatures? Does the prospect of casting a humongous creature to overrun your opponent's puny defenses give you excitement? Well, Animar, Soul of Elements may be the commander of choice for you. An aggressively costed teamer commander, whenever you play a creature spell, Animar gets a +1/+1 counter put onto it. For each counter on it, your creatures will cost 1 generic mana less. This is going to be a focal point for our deck. We want to play the biggest and most powerful creatures we can for as cheaply as we can. So our deck will start games by casting smaller creatures to build up the bonus counters on Animar to cheapen up our bigger threats. We will be able to build up enough of a discount that we can drop our biggest creatures for next to nothing. This is how we're going to win. Since this is very much a creature-heavy zoo style deck, we will want to go over our creature base in detail. But first, we should talk about how we will work with such little in the way of non-creature spells. First of all, we'll need creature tutors. Birthing Pod, Green Sun Zenith, and Worldly Tutors will get us our creatures when we need them. Asceticism will protect our creatures from our opponent's spells, and if need be, Quicksilver Amulet will let us drop any creature into play for a cheap 4 generic mana. Warstorm Surge and Pandemonium each add a small amount of burn that can put some serious hurt on your opponents just for dropping your beasts into play. Speaking of beasts, let's move on to the most important and biggest part of the deck. The creatures. We run 42 creatures, which is a very high number of creatures. But let's go over the key creatures. Remember that the full deck list and the tapped out gallery will be in the description of this video if you want to see what isn't covered in this video. Birds of Paradise, Coiling Oracle, Llanowar Elves, and Radiclaw Mystic will all provide early game mana ramp towards getting Animar into play and our bigger creatures. To enhance our army as a whole, we have Archetype of Aggression to give us trample, Edric, Spymaster of Tress to give us some card draw off of our attacks. Heartland Storyteller will give us more card draw than our opponents will, as they will most likely be playing more non-creature spells than us. The Master Biomancer will buff all of our creatures as they enter play, and Serac Dragonclaws protects our creatures and gives them trample as well. Finally, Yisan makes an appearance in this deck as an increasingly more useful creature tutor. Now, let's talk about game enders. We have a handful of overly powerful creature bombs in this deck that will spell game over once they hit the field. Craterhoof Behemoth and Pathbreaker Ebix will both make your army unstoppably large and tramply. Savageborn Hydra, as well as basically any Hydra you'd like to include in this deck, will become larger and larger if Animar has a bunch of counters sitting on it, as those counters will help pay for that colorless mana cost for those X cost Hydras. Finally, and my most favorite part of this deck, we have a selection of giant Eldrazi to smoosh opponents in the form of both the old and new Ulamog and It That Betrays. These Eldrazi, when they make their appearance, there will be very little for your opponent to do to resist them. The Annihilator ability will take care of a lot of their deck. New Ulamog's 20-card Exile will make very quick work of your opponent's library, destroying their options. So let's talk mana base. We're in teamer colors, so we're going to need red, green, and blue, and we're going to be needing more than just your basic mountain, forest, and island. Obviously, we can use shock lands, pain lands, fetch lands, oh my, but rather than prattle on about these more common inclusions that by now, watching these videos, you understand that most commander decks will need, let's talk about some cards that you may want to consider. Ancient Ziggurat is a very good card for this deck. It gives you any mana you may need for creature spells, so it's almost an auto-include. Dryad Arbor is both a creature and a land, making it doubly useful in this deck. Kessig Wolfrun will give a boost and trample to a target creature, and Alchemist's Refuge makes hand traps out of your creatures. Being able to drop any creature you need at instant speed during either player's turn is a very useful combat trick to have. It's great to be able to drop something during your opponent's turn while they're swinging in and potentially ruin their attempt at attacking. And lastly, I'd like to keep a copy of Rogue's Passage on standby if I need a big bad beastie to get some lethal damage through for game. Animar, Soul of Elements is a fun deck for Magic players who love the best of big creatures. Rather than having to spend a ton of mana to play all of your big favorite spells, well, in this deck, the more creatures you cast makes the bigger creatures super cheap. Being able to drop free colorless Eldrazi without a second thought is an exhilarating feeling, and playing this deck will give you all of that and much more. Don't forget, if you liked this video, remember to leave a like down below. It helps the channel out a lot. Let me know what commander you would like to see next. I have a list of suggestions that we'll be going through every single one that I can. Also, if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to the Planeswalker Project for all the Magic the Gathering goodness you could ever want, and thank you for watching the Planeswalker Project.